I was standing in the hallway of a public elementary school in Tokyo recently, and I saw a scene that, well, in a modern Western context, it would likely spark a parental riot.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It was just past noon, and you see this group of 6-year-olds, barely tall enough to reach the sink, and they are down on their hands and knees with wet rags.
And they're not playing, I take it?
No, not playing. They were scrubbing the hallway floor, moving in this really synchronized line. In the bathroom right next to them, other first graders were, and I mean this literally, scrubbing the toilets.
Wow.
What was so disorienting was the atmosphere. There was no resentment, no chaos, and, noticeably no adult janitors anywhere in sight.
So who was in charge?
Well, when I mentioned this to a teacher, he just looked at me with this kind of mild confusion, almost as if I'd asked him why the sky was blue.
He didn't get the question.
He didn't. He said, "We don't hire cleaners. The students are the cleaners." And it creates this strange cognitive dissonance.
I can imagine.
You're standing in one of the wealthiest, most technologically advanced nations on Earth, but the school system operates on what looks like institutionalized child labor.
Right.
But as I watched those kids, efficiently wiping down the baseboards, the bigger picture just clicked into place for me. This wasn't a budget-saving measure.
It was something else entirely.
It was a factory floor for social order. That 6-year-old with the rag isn't just cleaning a floor. He is being installed with a social operating system.
And that operating system is what explains so much about adult Japanese society.
Exactly. It explains why, 20 years later, he won't loot a store during a blackout or toss trash onto a spotless Tokyo street.
That image is incredibly powerful, and that cognitive dissonance you felt, that's really the central theme of this deep dive.
Yeah.
How does a society that excels at, technological optimization and industrial efficiency rely so fundamentally on this institutionalized, collective, almost primitive labor starting in primary school?
It seems completely counterintuitive.
It does. So our mission here is to trace that social operating system, those seemingly mundane daily rituals, and show you exactly how they translate into Japan's distinct adult societal outcomes.
Things like the exceptional civic order, the incredible resilience.
Exactly. The resilience in the face of disaster, the legendary commitment to quality, and a unique form of psychological well-being that is entirely rooted in interdependence, not individualism.
So we're going to connect the dots.
We are going to connect the dots between cleaning a toilet as a 6-year-old and how that same person handles organizational failure as a project manager decades later.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have 2 core mandatory rituals that form the foundation of this system: the school lunch, Kyushoku, and the cleaning time, Osoji. Let's start with Kyushoku.
Good place to start.
It's far more than just lunch. It is, as the sources describe it, a meticulously choreographed ritual of social conditioning.
It is indeed. While the term just translates to school lunch, it functions as this comprehensive lesson in applied logistics and moral education.
So not just about nutrition.
Not at all. You have to understand that students are deliberately not passive recipients of a meal. They are active participants in a miniature supply chain. They're referred to as lunch helpers.
That reframing supply chain participants, that's key, isn't it? It implies a high level of functional responsibility right from the start.
It does. And think about the detail involved. These helpers, they put on special hygienic uniforms, caps, masks, aprons, before they even get near the food.
Mm-hmm.
They transport the large, heavy pots of prepared food from the designated kitchen area to their classrooms. Then, and this is crucial, they must serve precise portions to their classmates, ensuring fairness and equal distribution.
So it's not just about hygiene, it's a foundational lesson in responsibility. If you mess up a portion or if you spill.
Right. You're not just affecting yourself, you're disrupting the meal and potentially creating scarcity for the entire group. It's a huge deal.
So it's an early, tangible application of the craftsman spirit, the shokunin, but applied to what we would consider a pretty low-status, mundane task.
That is the goal.
They have to approach portioning out stewed fish with the same precision a master carpenter approaches cutting wood.
That's a perfect way to put it. It instills what is sometimes called shokunin kishitsu, the craftsman spirit, by showing that dignity and precision have to be applied to every task, no matter how small or unglamorous it seems.
Every action has to have purpose and quality for the whole thing to work.
For the collective mechanism to work smoothly.
Yes.
This commitment to the details of the mundane is like the first pillar.
And the second pillar, which I find even more striking, is the aggressive enforcement of total uniformity. specifically the policy that prohibits homemade bento boxes.
That prohibition is arguably the single most powerful anti-entitlement mechanism in the entire Japanese system.
How so?
Well, in an individualistic society, the bento box would be a marker of status, right?
Yeah.
It would show off the wealth of the parents, how fancy the preparation is, the resources available to that one family.
Right. We'd have the kid with the fancy sushi and the kid with the simple sandwich.
Exactly. But by banning it and enforcing that every single child, the future child of a CEO, the child of a shopkeeper, sits side by side eating the identical meal, they just surgically remove the whole notion of special treatment.
It prevents that early formation of class-based identity markers that are based on consumption.
It does. It forces an equality that isn't some abstract idea. It's a daily, tangible reality that everyone in the room shares. This policy, it basically inoculates the child against an inherent sense of entitlement.
And it teaches them that their sustenance and dignity come from being part of a shared system.
Not from inherited status or wealth.
Yes, and the ritual wraps up with the mandatory chant of itadakimasu before they eat. Our sources frame this as touching on gratitude and moral debt.
And that framing is absolutely vital. Itadakimasu, which we often translate as I humbly receive, isn't just some empty piety. It's not just saying grace.
It's more functional than that.
Much more. The meal is explicitly framed as a gift that connects the consumer, the child, to this vast network of invisible labor. The farmer who grew the rice, the cook who prepared the fish, and the student helper who just served the portion.
So the act of eating becomes a recognition of mutual obligation.
And this is why food waste is treated with such moral weight. In many cultures, wasting food is, inefficient or maybe a bit rude. Here, it becomes a moral feeling.
A breach of collective trust.
A direct breach of collective trust. It's an insult to the labor of everyone who contributed to that plate. It forces the child, through years and years of repetition, to consider the efforts of others, even during the most personal act of consumption.
The peer pressure to finish your food must be immense.
Oh, the emotional pressure to finish your portion to not cause meiwaku trouble for the cooks or the servers, it's profound.
So if Kyushoku sets the logistical and moral groundwork, Osoji, the cleaning time, is where the philosophy of ownership through labor is truly installed.
Yes. This is the aesthetics of humility. The core philosophy is straightforward and just stunningly effective. You only truly care for what you have maintained yourself.
I love that.
By making students responsible for scrubbing and maintaining their entire school environment, classrooms, corridors, halls, bathrooms, that public space subconsciously becomes an extension of their personal property.
Which gives us the psychological underpinning for one of Japan's most famous cultural outcomes, the astonishing lack of public vandalism or litter, even in massive anonymous cities like Tokyo.
The psychological equivalence is forged over years and years. Defiling a public space starts to feel like defiling your own labor, your own home. The public realm isn't outsourced to some anonymous cleaning crew or seen as someone else's problem.
It's a collective possession.
And its upkeep is a collective, daily earned responsibility. It actively resists the whole concept of the tragedy of the commons.
I do wonder, though, how they prevent this from just turning into chaos or resentment. I mean, in a typical American school, if you hand a group of 6-year-olds mops and buckets, you might just get a water fight.
That's where the meticulous choreography comes in. Tying back to what we said about Kyushoku, academic life stops completely for 15 to 20 minutes. And everyone, including the teachers, and often the principal, picks up the tools.
So it's not a punishment, it's just part of the day.
It's just what you do. The key structure is the division into han, or small, rotating groups. And each group is responsible for a specific area.
And crucially, the system leverages peer-to-peer teaching, which fosters leadership and mentorship.
Exactly. The han are structured deliberately to foster these cross-age group connections. For example, you'll have older students, like 6th graders, given the responsibility of mentoring the youngest ones, the 1st graders.
And the older kid doesn't just supervise, right? They actually teach.
They teach. They show the smaller child the specific, correct technique for wringing out a rag, how to sweep a corner properly, or how to efficiently dry a window without leaving streaks. This is vital in a society where a lot of kids are hitoriko, or only children.
So they might not have much experience guiding or being guided by other kids of different ages.
Right. It builds this early sense of social hierarchy that's based on utility in teaching, not just on dominance or being the loudest.
But the truly profound element here is what you could call a systematic ego dissolution, this resistance to elitism.
It is the ultimate leveler. The wealthiest child in the entire district scrubs the exact same toilet floor as the poorest. This practice just systematically dismantles the ego.
It resists the idea that certain work is demeaning or below your station.
By personally performing what Western societies often designate as low-status labor, every future leader, professional, or politician gains this innate, unspoken respect for service staff. You can't look down on a cleaner when you've been one your whole life.
The message is crystal clear. Dignity comes not from being served, but from the capacity to serve the collective.
And this codifies the fundamental social principle of meiwaku o kakenai, not causing trouble for others.
Yeah.
This message is drilled into muscle memory through years of daily physical practice.
So your primary social value isn't measured by how brightly you shine as an individual,
But by your positive contribution to collective harmony and by the effort you put in to make sure you are not a burden. This right here is the bedrock upon which Japan's famously high-trust, self-regulating society is built.
It's just incredible that such simple chores can create such deep programming. So let's see what happens when that programming is truly tested, when the context shifts from cleaning floors to surviving a life or death disaster. We're moving into the translation of school discipline into adult civic responsibility and disaster resilience.
The link is seamless because that childhood training becomes the adult default setting, especially in moments of high stress or crisis when rational thought can be suppressed by panic. And we see this most dramatically in behavior relating to order and resource distribution.
The internationally famous phenomenon of the orderly queues during natural disasters.
Exactly. Because students spend 12 years queuing patiently and fairly for Kyushoku, practicing measured consumption and delaying gratification. When a major disaster, like the 2011 triple disaster, hits, adults automatically form orderly lines to receive supplies.
So even when there's extreme scarcity, the default is cooperation.
The default is cooperation, not panic or pushing, which would dissolve order in a lot of individualistic cultures pretty quickly.
And the connection to littering in Tokyo is also behavioral, right? The sources point out that Tokyo has virtually no public trash bins, yet the streets are immaculate.
That's a pure reflection of internalized civic management. Because they were personally responsible for sorting and cleaning their own lunch waste in school, the adult citizen just knows the script. You carry your personal waste home.
The responsibility is internalized by the individual, not outsourced to public infrastructure.
Precisely. The public space is clean because waste management is your job, not the city's. Social order in this system is self-regulating.
This self-regulating capability is most vital when it comes to disaster resilience education, or DRE. Japan is a world leader here, incorporating DRE across all educational sectors, formal, non-formal, and informal.
And it's backed by major policies like the Fundamental Plan for National Resilience, the FPNR. This plan underscores the need to combine structural measures like seawalls with non-structural measures, which is where DRE comes in.
So it's not just about building bigger walls.
No, it's about building smarter citizens. The government considers the share of schools educating in disaster safety to be a key performance indicator, and that share is near 100%. The education is comprehensive, covering everything from seismic safety to fire drills, often done monthly.
But the real lesson isn't just about rote obedience. It's about fostering proactive, independent thinking for when the usual rules collapse. And this is highlighted by the Kamaishi Miracle following the 2011 triple disaster.
Kamaishi is the definitive case study for the success of DRE. After a large-scale mega tsunami warning back in 2005, local schools implemented this specific multi-year disaster preparedness curriculum.
So this was a long-term project.
A very long-term project. The program went deep into local geology, emphasized survival training, and constantly reinforced local wisdom.
Including the phrase tsunami tendenko. That's a fascinating instruction.
It is. It translates roughly to tsunami, everybody runs separately.
Separately. That feels so counterintuitive. Don't you stick together?
You'd think so, but it teaches that when the alert sounds, you run to the highest ground immediately, using your own judgment, and crucially, you do not stop to look for family or friends. Your immediate survival is paramount.
Wow.
It emphasizes this paradox. The collective system trains the individual for independent action when chaos strikes.
And what was the outcome of this sustained training when the 2011 tsunami actually hit Kamaishi?
The result was the miracle. 3,000 Kamaishi pupils ran to high ground when the alert was issued, saving their own lives. This wasn't a passive reaction.
They didn't wait for a teacher to tell them what to do.
No. It showed that the students had developed the ability to think independently and proactively. acting on their own localized judgment based on the circumstances, rather than blindly following some static predetermined route that might have been compromised.
They chose the best path in the moment?
Exactly. So DRE moved past simply knowing facts about tsunamis toward developing the life-sustaining skills required for high-stakes decision-making under extreme duress.
The goal shifted to fostering an independent mindset.
Precisely. The training is explicitly designed to improve decision-making based on changing circumstances. And this dynamic preparation is visible in everyday life disaster preparedness, which is known as Seikatsu Bozai.
Let's talk about some of the unique hands-on tools they use for this. We have Nigechizu, the DIG, and the Nigechizu app.
Right. So Japan fosters a strong Bozai culture built on 3 pillars: self-help, Jio, community support, Kyojo, and public support, Jio. These training tools are engineered around the first 2.
Jijo and Kyojo.
Exactly. Nigechizu are hand-drawn evacuation maps. Students use colored pencils and even ropes to measure distances, drawing out local risks and safe areas themselves.
Why hand-drawn? Why not just give them a printed map?
Because it makes the environment tangible and personal. By forcing the act of creation, the student has to engage with their specific neighborhood, internalizing the spatial relationships between their home, their school, and the evacuation points.
It enhances retention way beyond just passive observation.
Far beyond. And then you have the disaster imagination game, the DIG.
That sounds almost military in its origin.
It is. The DIG was developed using know-how from military commanding post exercises, but it's applied to civic life. Participants use transparent overlay maps that show roads, rivers, facilities, potential damages. They have to collaboratively build an evacuation map and assess risks in a dynamic, evolving way.
So it trains the community to think like first responders, to see bottlenecks and resource issues before an event happens.
Exactly. And technologically, they're evolving, moving beyond static routes with tools like the Nigechizu smartphone app.
How is that different from, say, Google Maps?
Well, standard navigation apps show you a single, static route. Nigechizu takes into account the variability of real risks in real time. It shows your location, danger zones, and safe places relative to an advancing catastrophe like a projected tsunami surge or an expanding fire.
So the focus is still on improving your personal judgment.
Always. It allows the user to make their own risk assessments based on the catastrophe-specific evolving behavior rather than just rigid, pre-programmed instructions.
And this all comes back to the group ethos. The community element is crucial.
Absolutely. The training is deeply intertwined with strengthening local ties. In post-disaster scenarios, it is this tightly knit, well-networked community, the adult version of the school hand, that provides Kyojo community support.
They make sure the vulnerable groups are taken care of.
They ensure support for the elderly, the disabled, those needing medical help, making sure no one is left behind. The practical application of collective duty that was nurtured through Kyushoku and Osoji translates directly into a robust social safety net in a crisis.
It's clear that the discipline instilled in childhood translates into this remarkable societal order and resilience. But that discipline also translates into something that defines Japan economically and aesthetically: its commitment to quality. Let's dive into the shokunin kyushitsu, the craftsman spirit.
This is where you see the adult professional manifestation of that ego suppression we talked about. The discipline learned scrubbing floors is translated directly into devotion and quality control in the workforce.
And we can see this so vividly in the anecdote about the Shinkansen, the bullet train cleaning crews.
The famous 7-minute miracle cruise?
Yes.
Yes. They managed to completely empty, clean, and reset an entire bullet train between stops in less time than it takes to order a coffee.
It's legendary efficiency.
It is, but the key is the dedication, embodied by a cleaner named Yudo. When he first started the job, he hated it. He was a young, educated guy, and he felt cleaning trains was beneath his intellectual level. He felt demeaned by the service work.
So what changed his perspective?
He consciously recalled his middle school Osoji training. He remembered his teacher saying that the act of cleaning wasn't just about the surface, it was about polishing your spirit.
Ah, so that childhood lesson came back to him.
It did. He internalized the idea that service, no matter how humble, is an act of moral engagement. He started to find satisfaction not in the recognition or the paycheck, but in the act of service itself.
That completely reframes cleaning from a budgetary necessity to a moral performance.
It does. He began obsessing over details, viewing the impeccably clean and perfectly rotated seat as the immediate environment for the next tired traveler. There's a famous story where he found a tiny lost earring.
Yeah.
He sprinted off the train across the platform and found the owner who had just boarded the next connection. That wasn't in his job description. That was the adult commitment to quality and service that transcends organizational expectations.
That elevation of duty is what defines Shokunin Kishitsu. It's a moral stance, isn't it? Not just a work ethic.
It is defined as a devotion to one's work, as an act of service, humility, and emotional expression. It goes beyond technical competence. The ultimate focus is on harmony, that subtle, continuous balance between the tool, the touch, the material, and its connection to society.
Which is very different from the pure, cold, quantitative logic of efficiency that dominates a lot of Western production.
Very different. And this ethos subtly resists Western-style consumerism, which values rapid turnover and disposability. If a product is imbued with the maker's spirit, you treat it with respect.
That's the critical economic and cultural distinction. Mass-produced designs, no matter how functional, can often feel emotionally sterile.
Whereas a handcrafted chair made with the Shokunin spirit carries the presence and intention of its maker. It resists the sterile perfection of automation. The craftsman might even leave deliberate minor imperfections, a specific tool mark, an asymmetrical stitch.
And those are embraced as character.
Exactly. They're seen as character, depth, and warmth. The source material notes that these imperfections are what imbue the object with meaning, making it feel alive, like a companion that evolves with use, rather than a disposable commodity.
This dedication to nuance extends beyond the tangible product and profoundly impacts the design of space itself, which leads us to one of the most fascinating aesthetic concepts in Japanese culture: ma, the power of the pause.
Ma, the space between things, the interval. It's a really hard concept to grasp fully in an efficiency-driven culture.
Because in Western efficiency culture, emptiness is wasted space. It's a negative.
Right. In Japan, ma is profound. It is not emptiness. It is presence in restraint. It's the space where meaning is allowed to gather, not in what is built or said, but in what is deliberately withheld, what is left open for reflection and feeling.
And it's intrinsically human. It resists measurement or computational algorithms.
Completely. Algorithms prioritize speed and directness. Ma prioritizes emotional choreography. Think of the deliberate design of the path leading to a traditional tea house. It's never straight.
Right, winds, it might cross a stream, it might be heavily shaded.
And that winding path is a functional delay. It slows the body and invites reflection, forcing you to shed the preoccupations of the outside world before you engage with the ceremony.
And then there's the humble threshold, the entry point itself.
It requires you to physically remove your shoes and bow your head, a physical and inward transition. This pause, this interval, this ma, is meticulously crafted with a sensitivity to human emotion, ensuring the mind has time to catch up to the body.
Another powerful example is the noren, that fabric curtain hung over the doorway of a shop or a restaurant.
The noren is a soft, intentional interruption. It filters the view, it delays the transition. You have to physically pass through it, maybe brushing the fabric. That moment of hesitation, that physical engagement, that's ma in motion.
It softens the boundary between the public world and the interior space. It prevents an abrupt shock of transition.
So design becomes an act of empathy. It anticipates the required emotional transition rather than just serving the function of getting from point A to point B as fast as possible.
And this carries into modern architecture, too.
It does. Architects like Kengo Kuma use advanced technology like parametric modeling, but strictly in service of elemental tactile intelligence. They prioritize the roughness of cedar, the light filtering through paper, the feel of natural stone.
Technology is the medium, not the master.
Exactly. His buildings are, in his own words, invitations to be present, reminding us that even the most complex structures need these pockets of stillness.
How does Ma apply functionally, say, in a modern office design? We can't all have winding paths to our desks.
In the corporate environment, Ma allows for mental clarity. Instead of the purely open-plan, loud, constantly visible office, designers will incorporate quiet alcoves, reflection booths, or small, thoughtfully placed internal gardens that act as visual pauses.
So these pockets of stillness within a big, overwhelming environment serve as an emotional reset.
They allow employees to regain perspective and presence before diving back into intense tasks, which actually increases qualitative output.
And similarly, in urban planning, it encourages a slower, more human pace in the public sphere.
Yes. Instead of maximizing walking speed with perfectly straight lines, Mon encourages paths in parks or plazas that gently curve, inviting a pause and reflection. The space itself doesn't demand immediate movement or utility maximization. It encourages quiet interaction.
This commitment to qualitative experience over sheer quantitative efficiency is really the enduring legacy of this collective ethos.
It is.
Now we have to shift to the profound psychological consequences of this high-trust, interdependent culture, which, as we've established, has been systematically built since childhood. This is often the hardest section for a Western listener to process because we prioritize the independent self so intensely.
That's really the crux of the cultural divide in mental health. Western societies, like the U.S., tend toward independent self-controls. The self is autonomous, separate from social context, prioritizing self-acceptance and personal growth.
And in Japan?
In Japan, the cultural tendency is toward interdependent self-controls. The self is inherently connected with others in a social group, prioritizing harmony and maintaining good interpersonal relationships above all else.
And this difference profoundly changes how concepts like compassion and anxiety manifest, doesn't it?
It acts as a massive cultural moderator for well-being. Take self-compassion, being kind to yourself when you're suffering. Studies show this is a significantly stronger driver of positive emotion in the U.S. It aligns perfectly with the Western ideal of autonomy and positive self-regard.
But the research suggests that in Japan, self-criticism can actually be adaptive.
It can be, yes. In Confucian-influenced cultures, there's a high value on hierarchy and role mastery. So self-critical thoughts and the continuous effort to improve your performance within the group actually enable Japanese individuals to affirm their connection with others and enhance their sense of belonging.
So in that context, extreme self-compassion might even be viewed as self-indulgent.
Right. While self-criticism is sometimes recognized as a virtue that demonstrates your commitment to the collective.
So the path to feeling good is less about accepting yourself as perfect now and more about committing to the process of becoming better for the group later.
Precisely. It's a relational goal, not a purely internal one. Now, compare that to compassion for others, that feeling that arises when you witness suffering and it motivates you to help. That was associated with greater positive emotion and decreased anxiety across both cultures. Altruism seems to be universally positive.
But there was a unique finding regarding what the Japanese sources call interdependent happiness.
Yes, and this is crucial. Compassion for others was related to interdependent happiness only in Japan. And this type of happiness is defined not by peak emotional states or personal success.
But by what?
By the subjective assessment of being interpersonally harmonized, quiescent, and ordinary.
Interpersonally harmonized, quiescent, and ordinary. That completely reframes the goal of life away from individualistic achievement.
It suggests that for interdependent cultures, the ultimate purpose, the ultimate goal of life, is the success of relational tasks, the maintenance of harmony. Tending to the suffering of others is a direct pathway to feeling truly happy and secure within the collective.
It validates fitting in and being a productive, non-disruptive, ordinary part of the social machine.
Exactly.
This cultural emphasis on the other, on the risk of causing meiwaku, is also reflected in specific forms of anxiety. There's a clear distinction between Western social anxiety disorder, SAD, and the Japanese condition, Taijin Kyufusho, TKS.
Right. Traditional social anxiety disorder is primarily characterized by self-focused attention. The person is afraid that their own inappropriate behaviors, stuttering, blushing, fumbling a presentation, will result in negative judgment of their competence or character.
It's all about, what will they think of me?
Precisely. Now, what's the additional unique layer of cognition present in Taijin Kyufusho?
It's an other-focused cognition.
Exactly. It's the fear of offending others by one's self-perceived inappropriate behaviors. For example, a TKS-prone individual worries that their perceived flaw, maybe an odd smell, an awkward expression, or just being visibly nervous, is causing trouble for others, making them uncomfortable or wasting their time.
So the fear isn't, they will think I am stupid. The fear is, my stupidity is inconveniencing them and disrupting the harmony.
That is the difference. Because Japanese culture is so intensely trained in Meiwaku Okakanai, TKS symptoms are generally more prevalent. They spend a tremendous amount of cognitive energy worrying about being a burden.
The very system that creates extreme civic order also creates this intense psychological pressure to maintain it perfectly.
Left you be the one causing the ripples. Yes.
That sounds incredibly stressful. If the focus on the collective is so intense, what happens when an individual inevitably fails? In a hyper-individualistic society, failure often leads to catastrophic self-blame, shame, and isolation.
And that's the profound trade-off. Here's where the system paradoxically provides a psychological safety net. The systematic suppression of the individual ego, which seems so restrictive in good times, actually diffuses the weight of failure in bad times.
The collective structure absorbs the shock.
It absorbs the shock. Let's revisit that analogy of the project manager making a critical error. The team absorbs it like an Onawa group jump rope.
The group jump rope, right.
Everyone has to jump in perfect synchronization. If one person trips, the entire rope stops. The group doesn't stop to blame the person who tripped. They stop to reset the rhythm because the group entity matters more than the individual career.
So in a Western context, that project manager's failure might lead to them being fired or shunned because of the emphasis on individual accountability.
Above all else, yes. But in the Japanese context, because her duty was defined relationally to the team, the failure is also relational. And so it's absorbed by the team.
Her failure is mitigated by the collective.
The team covers the loss, ensures she learns from the mistake, and the group resets. She doesn't have to bear the soul-crushing weight of that failure. This creates a different kind of resilience, built on belonging and shared existence, which actively mitigates the loneliness and devastating isolation often associated with high-stakes individual failure in the West.
To truly grasp the rigidity of this system, we need to understand its history. The daily rituals were always there, but the hyper-detailed regulation of student life, known as Kyushoku or school rules, intensified dramatically in the post-war period.
Specifically from the 1950s through the 1970s, Kyushoku were present since the late 19th century. But during those post-war decades, they evolved from general guidelines into these meticulous, all-encompassing rules that govern student lifestyles both in and out of school.
We're talking about micromanagement on a massive scale. Give us some examples of the level of detail.
Well, we saw rules dictating the precise acceptable width of trousers like 20 to 24 centimeters, or rules mandating that front hair could not reach the eyebrows. There were specific regulations for uniforms, rules banning certain types of bags, even rules detailing how a student should raise their hand to speak in class to maintain decorum.
It was a comprehensive standardization of everything.
Appearance, deportment, and off-campus activities, yes.
So why did schools embrace such comprehensive responsibility for the whole child? Our sources suggest 4 major hypotheses, starting with the economy.
Hypothesis 1. The economic drivers. During the rapid industrial expansion after World War II, the economy required the mass production of a disciplined workforce. Industrial and business leaders exerted direct pressure on the Ministry of Education.
They weren't subtle about it.
Not at all. They explicitly asked schools to reorganize the system to train highly socialized individuals who are capable of performing reliably in the rigorous, hierarchical, and often repetitive structures of modern factories and corporate offices.
So the precise uniforms, the perfect queuing, the mandatory cleaning, these were seen as pre-training for the factory floor or the salaryman's regimented office life.
Exactly. A veteran teacher from that period said that when students finish school and start working, they must be punctual, get along with coworkers, follow hierarchy, and maintain a professional appearance. Schools viewed Kyushoku as a direct educational strategy to prepare students for these precise workplace expectations.
The national mandate toward economic development provided the context to tighten these rules.
Dramatically.
The second factor was a cultural reaction to the success of that economic drive, the rise of consumerism.
Right. The economic prosperity of the 1960s brought a significant consumption revolution, which brought with it this cultural shift toward hedonism, or what was sometimes called a fun morality.
And the establishment got worried.
The Ministry of Education became genuinely worried that this perceived spiritual vacuum would challenge traditional, necessary values of thrift, self-restraint, and conformity. They saw this new youth culture as a destructive force that could threaten sustained prosperity.
And so school rules were intentionally weaponized to combat this cultural erosion.
Yes. The ministry actively sought to rebuff the impact of emerging cultural values on youth. This legitimized rules banning students from entering video arcades, bowling alleys, and coffee shops, and setting strict neighborhood curfews.
Schools became the necessary moral bulwark.
They were trying to shield students from the temptations of a rapidly modernizing, consumption-driven society.
The third hypothesis involves a fundamental shift in the Japanese family structure, specifically the rise of the salaryman workforce.
The increasing number of salaried male employees meant that fathers were working these extraordinarily long hours. A 60 to 80-hour work week was the norm, and they were often transferred alone, far away from their families, for years at a time.
This created a huge decline in the father's disciplinary function within the family.
A significant decline. The Ministry of General Affairs noted that children in these families had little opportunity to observe their father's work, which led to a decline in traditional family socialization.
So if the parents, particularly the fathers, weren't present to provide discipline, they turned to the institution they trusted most, the school.
Precisely. Parents increasingly requested that schools provide disciplinary guidance. They looked to teachers to supply the objective, institutional discipline that their own affection, coupled with limited time, prevented them from exercising fully.
I read one high school principal recalled that the rule prohibiting students from getting a moped license, even though it was a legal right for that age group, was initially requested by parents.
By parents who just couldn't convince their own children not to drive one. It's a powerful moment of outsourcing. The school becomes the external, objective disciplinary force that the family, strained by these new economic pressures, could no longer be.
Parents found it easier to instruct their children if they could just cite school rules as the non-negotiable reason.
It shifted the burden of unpopular enforcement away from their own limited family time.
And finally, the immense pressure of the academic system itself, the examination hell, also fueled the need for rigid Kyushoku.
The entrance examination system was, and remains, intensely competitive. Passing these exams is the gateway to job security, middle-class status, and lifetime employment. Parents demanded rules that would eliminate any possible distraction.
Ensuring their children remained singularly devoted to academic preparation.
Yes. The intensity of that preparation is famously summed up in the phrase, 4 pass, 5 fail. Meaning, 4 hours of sleep means you pass the exam, 5 means you fail.
Wow.
To maintain that monastic level of devotion, schools needed to regulate potential distractions aggressively. Hence, rules banning entry to bowling alleys and video arcades were rationalized as protecting academic performance.
And parents even requested rules limiting TV time.
And, perhaps most tellingly, rules requiring them to eat breakfast, ensuring physical readiness for maximum academic output. The rigidity of Kyushoku was thus highly rationalized across economic necessity, cultural preservation, familial strains, and extreme educational competitiveness.
We have completed the circuit of this social operating system. We started with the 6-year-old scrubbing the floor, an act of compulsory collective duty, Kyushoku and Osoji, and we've traced that discipline all the way through to the adult who queues patiently during a disaster, builds immaculate bullet trains, and finds psychological safety within the team structure rather than the singular, isolated self.
The fundamental insight is that this system intentionally uses mandatory childhood labor and systemic ego suppression to forge unique and highly valuable societal outcomes. A self-regulating civic order, an unparalleled commitment to qualitative precision, shokuni kishitsu, and community-built disaster resilience that saves thousands of lives.
It's an intentional factory floor.
Designed to produce high-trust, interoperable social components.
But this high degree of social harmony comes with a profound, intentional trade-off.
It does. The system willingly sacrifices a degree of what we, in highly individualistic societies, consider paramount. Childhood individuality and unfettered self-expression. Practices like enforced uniformity in meals, the intense regulation of Kyushoku over appearance and leisure,
and the societal pressure of taijinti fusho.
All of it would be seen as restrictive, even psychologically oppressive, by Western standards that are so focused on the independent self.
So what is purchased in return for that sacrifice of individualism?
They purchase a profound adult freedom. They buy the freedom to trust strangers implicitly, the freedom to walk safe, spotless streets at night, the freedom from the chaos, looting, and widespread distrust that plagues hyper-individualistic societies during a crisis. The systemic suppression of the individual ego, counterintuitively, acts as the social safety net, providing psychological resilience by ensuring that when you fail, you do not stand alone. Order in Japan is not something mandated by law enforcement or heavy surveillance. It's something purchased daily through deeply ingrained collective labor and the binding psychological assurance of interdependence.